Hello and welcome to another short drawing lesson. This is going to be the first in a 5-part series on perspective. Do we need another drawing lesson on perspective? I don't know, they've been done a few times in the past, but it's something I've given a lot of thought to, and I think that even though I've got all of these lovely books that explain how to do perspective drawing, they can get rather technical, and often it's great for technical drawing, if you're an architect or something, but they're not always that useful if you want to just be, if you're out and about sketching. So I'm going to have a go at explaining it in a way that's simple and that will be useful to you in your day-to-day sketching. And there's one other point I'd like to make, and that's how important it is to remember that these are just drawing conventions. 1 point, 2 point and 3 point perspective is just an arbitrary drawing convention that we've invented, and it's not, like I used to think, a scientific way of representing the world around us. It's just a way that we've come up with that makes it easier to draw things in 3 dimensions. So let's have a look at a few examples. So the easiest way to represent something and to show an object from its various sides is to do a plan like this, a plan and elevation. So here we have a house and we can see the end, the front and the top. Kind of gives you all the information, and but it's a bit dry, a bit boring. It's not really 3-dimensional, is it? So let's have a look. The next step would be to maybe do an isometric drawing. So in an isometric drawing, we're taking this information, representing it in 3 dimensions, but there's no perspective at play here. We've decided that the y-axis, the up and down, is always going to be perfectly vertical. Any vertical lines will be vertical in the drawing. The x and z axes are going to be 30 degrees. So you see the bottom edge of the house. That's 30 degrees. Anything parallel to those will also always be 30 degrees. And we've just, we've chosen that arbitrarily. We could do a drawing that's where everything's at 45 degrees, which is another method of doing technical drawings. This is good for kind of exploded diagrams. It's still a bit dry, there's no perspective at play. These lines will never meet at a vanishing point, but it's sort of 3D, isn't it? So perspective is just a step on from these. If we have a look at some examples, here's a 1 point perspective drawing. So in this one, we've decided our rules for this 1 point perspective are that everything vertical is going to be vertical, everything horizontal is going to always be horizontal. The only axis that's going to be different is this z-axis, stuff that's going away from us and towards us. That's going to react to a vanishing point. So these lines converge in a vanishing point in the centre there. So that's the rules of 1 point perspective. One of the axes is acted upon by perspective. If I can get this menu back, and so look, the next one, 2 point perspective. In 2 point perspective, we've decided the rules are going to be that all the verticals will still always be vertical, whatever happens, vertical lines vertical. And the x and z, these 2 lines here, they're going to be acted upon by vanishing points. So these parallel lines on the house here will eventually meet at a vanishing point far off over here. These parallel lines, like the ridge line, those will eventually meet at a vanishing point far off on the left. But these verticals will always be vertical. However tall the building, they're never going to meet. So that takes us to 3 point perspective. So here we are. In 3 point perspective, we've decided that the rules are going to be that all 3 axes will be acted upon by vanishing points. So our verticals are no longer perfectly vertical anymore. They're tilted, and because we're looking down on this building, and they will eventually meet up at this vanishing point far below us. So perhaps that's the closest to what we experience in real life. But they're all just conventions, just like that isometric drawing I showed you at the beginning. They're just an invented way that we've come up with of showing something in 3D. These things can fall apart. So if we try to imagine a horizon, and it has a couple of vanishing points. Let's imagine that there's a very, very long wall in front of us. perpendicular to us. So we're looking directly at this wall. And when we look left, we see it goes on. It's so long that it disappears off to a vanishing point far, far off on the horizon. And when we look right, it does the same thing. It vanishes off to the far right as well. So here we are. So it meets on the vanishing point there. But there's a problem here, which is that we seem to have a corner in our wall, which is odd because we followed the rules and the manuals that we've got. We've used a ruler and we've done straight lines off to these vanishing points. But our straight wall has now got a corner in it for some reason. And the reason is that we see the world around us in a sort of type of perspective called curvilinear perspective. So the straight lines that we see around us have actually got slight curves when we look at them like this. So our wall should be ever so slightly curved. And that now makes more sense. So when we look at this section, the wall looks like it has a straight top and bottom, like it should have. And then when we look to the left, we can see our wall disappearing off to the horizon, far, far off over there. That looks okay. It looks almost like a straight line. And the same when we look to the right. So that's more like what's going on in the real world. There's a nice photo that demonstrates that. Here's somewhere. Let's have a look. So here's a fisheye view of a street. And we can see almost this vanishing point and this vanishing point at both sides. And we can see this street, which is a straight road, seems to have this curve, and the buildings are slightly curved, even though they're obviously straight topped. But we're used to just looking at a small area like this when we take our photos or do our sketches, and that looks much more like we'd expect it to, especially when we look down the street like this. These are all pretty much straight lines that you could draw with a ruler, and that looks fairly typical of a phone photo or something. There's not much distortion going on, it all looks fine. And then if we look down the street the other way, that's all fine. These buildings are nice and straight topped. And it's only when we draw or photograph a very wide scene like this, maybe with a panoramic camera, that we can start to see the curvature at play. And you can draw like this. There's a lovely artist called Paul Heaston who does drawings in this, very wide angle drawings. So wide that you can see his sketch pad and his hands down the bottom there and the whole room around him. Not an easy thing to do, but it's very dramatic. But like I say, most of the time we're just drawing a small section. And for that, straight lines work. Well, I hope that's given you some food for thought. And in the next videos, I'll go through 1 point, 2 point and 3 point perspective. And in the last one, I'll give you some tips for how to use that information in your day-to-day sketching, whether you're drawing from life or whether you're drawing things from your imagination. Hope you join me for those, and see you for the next one.